The parable of the Good Samaritan. The parable of the Good Samaritan is found in the New Testament in the Gospel of Luke, specifically in Luke chapter 10 verses 25 through 37. Here is the story of the parable of the Good Samaritan. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life? What is written in the law?" He replied, "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have.' Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." In this parable, a legal expert tries to test Jesus by asking what he must do to inherit eternal life. Jesus responds by asking the expert what is written in the law, to which the expert correctly answers that one must love God with all their heart and love their neighbor as themselves. Jesus affirms this response and tells the expert that following these commands leads to eternal life. However, the expert, wanting to justify himself, asks, "Who is my neighbor?" In response, Jesus tells the parable of the Good Samaritan. A man is traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho and is attacked by robbers. They strip him, beat him, and leave him half dead. A priest happens to pass by but crosses to the other side of the road and continues without helping the wounded man. A Levite also comes by, sees the injured man, but likewise crosses to the other side and continues his journey without assisting. A Samaritan then arrives, and despite historical enmity between Jews and Samaritans, he has compassion on the wounded man. He tends to his wounds, puts him on his donkey, takes him to an inn, and pays for his care, promising to return and cover any additional expenses. Jesus then asks the legal expert which of the 3 passers-by acted as a neighbor to the injured man. The expert correctly answers that it was the Samaritan who showed mercy. Jesus concludes by instructing the expert to go and do likewise. The parable of the Good Samaritan emphasizes the importance of loving and caring for one's neighbor, regardless of their background or circumstances. It teaches that genuine love and compassion for others should guide one's actions and that true neighborly love transcends boundaries and prejudices. The parable of the Good Samaritan, found in Luke 10:25-37, has been interpreted in various ways and holds multiple layers of meaning. Here are some common interpretations of this parable. 1. Neighborly love and compassion. The primary and most common interpretation of this parable focuses on the call to love one's neighbor as oneself. It teaches that we should show compassion and help those in need, irrespective of their background, ethnicity, or social status. The Samaritan, traditionally an enemy of the Jews, demonstrates that genuine love transcends prejudices and extends to all. 2. Eternal life and righteousness. In the context of the initial question about inheriting eternal life, some interpretations highlight that living out love and compassion as exemplified in this parable is a path to righteousness and eternal life. It emphasizes the moral imperative of loving one's neighbor. 3. Moral responsibility. The parable underscores our moral responsibility to help those in distress. The priest and Levite, who were expected to exemplify religious and moral standards, are criticized for their failure to act, serving as a warning to those who might neglect their moral obligations. 4. Social justice and advocacy. Some interpretations extend the message to issues of social justice and advocacy for marginalized and oppressed individuals. The parable encourages believers to stand up for the oppressed and work for a more just society. 5. Christian discipleship. The parable is seen as a model for Christian discipleship. It illustrates that being a true follower of Christ involves actively showing love and compassion to those in need. It challenges Christians to emulate the Good Samaritan's actions. 6. Interfaith and interethnic relations. In a broader context, the parable has been used to promote interfaith and interethnic understanding and cooperation. It teaches that acts of kindness and compassion can bridge divides and promote peace. 7. Care for the stranger. some interpretations emphasize the idea that the wounded man represents a stranger or foreigner. The parable encourages a welcoming attitude toward strangers and newcomers, reinforcing the importance of hospitality. 8. Allegory of salvation. In some allegorical interpretations, the wounded man symbolizes humanity fallen into sin, the Good Samaritan is Christ who rescues and heals, and the inn represents the church where souls are cared for and nurtured. These interpretations demonstrate the parable's adaptability to convey various lessons related to love, compassion, morality, and social justice. Different Christian denominations and theologians may emphasize specific aspects of these interpretations based on their theological perspectives and teachings.